Good morning. This morning I've got two gentlemen here from the Master Mariners. We have Captain David Ingham. Good morning, David.
Good morning.
And we have Ruffy.
Good morning, Patricia.
Good morning, Ruffy. And they're going to tell us about the Master Mariners. Start with a little bit of the history. So, if you'd like to give us a bit of an insight.
Well, the Felixstowe Master Mariners Club started in 1975. Master mariners who came ashore to work in the port of Felixstowe decided it would be a good idea to have some form of recreational and professional club to which they could attend every so often. So they started off monthly luncheons at the Felixstowe Ferry Sailing Club. At that time there were quite a few master mariners in the district, those that were employed at Felixstowe, who came ashore to start the original port off, and also the crew members of the masters of the European ferries, which ran a very good service.
Well, they definitely did.
And they started the club, and it was very successful. We have our own chaplain, who was one of the original members. He's the Reverend John Waller of Waldringfield. An interesting character. He always attends the meetings by boat from Waldringfield, and he comes down with some friends, also members. And the name of the boat, of course, is Jesus, belonging to the Reverend Waller. It can't be anything else, really.
Brilliant.
It's a very successful club. Recently taken over by Ruffy as our own sec. He's streamlined everything. We have our own website. So he sort of dragged us screaming into the 21st century. But I think I'll hand over to Ruffy to say a few things.
Yeah, well, you mentioned the website, and it's desirable these days to have these things, especially Master Mariners Felixstowe are looking for fully qualified, or indeed suitably qualified, master mariners to boost our numbers and to adjust the ratio between associates and fully qualified masters. So we are looking at the moment. We're looking forward to the day when a lady walks through the door with a master's ticket and claims membership, and she will be welcomed with open arms. In the meantime, as David says, yes, we are, and we consider ourselves to be reasonably successful.
Good.
We raised the princely sum of £2,750 last year, which we distributed to and between 10 nautical charities, quite a lot of whom are local.
Yes.
The first Felixstowe Sea Scouts, for example, where I joined them in 1953, I think, in the Cubs. Other local charities, we like to support them. We like to give the money locally, though we do support national charities for retired sailors.
Yes, which is a good thing.
We meet monthly. We have a speaker every month except August, when David and I and the other 147 members entertain our ladies. That gives us an excuse to go out for the other 11 months of the year.
That's it.
And the raffle, which we do every month, ensures that we have an excess of income over expenditure, which we can then distribute at Christmas time.
Okay. Yes. So a very worthwhile thing to get involved in, and any charity raising, obviously, you know, that's absolutely fantastic. So what are the main, to become a mariner, what are the credentials? What are the main credentials so you can actually qualify to be?
The usual pathway is to get an apprenticeship with a shipping company. I was fortunate enough to get an apprenticeship with the BP Tanker Company, with whom I stayed for 4 years.
Yeah.
After which you get a second mate certificate.
Yeah.
Then after a further 18 months, a mate certificate. And after a further 2 years, you can sit a master's certificate.
I see.
So it takes about 7 years in all to become a
Yes.
qualified master mariner.
Yeah, yeah.
After that, there's all branches of seafaring that you can go into. You can go tramp ships, liners, tankers,
Yes.
research ships, dredging, port operations.
Yes. Can you explain a little bit to our viewers about tramp ships? Because, I mean, they'll probably be sort of familiar with the others, but...
He's never been on a tramp ship, so he doesn't know.
Well,
Oh,
Ruffy, explain
I had
the
the
tramp
tramp
ship.
tanker, Ruffy.
Oh, he was a tramp tanker.
We went anywhere.
There it is. A tramp ship is a ship that goes anywhere.
Right.
It is not a liner.
No.
Now, most people think a liner is a thing with many, many lights and 4,000 passengers, and it goes from New York to London
Yes.
or wherever. But a liner can be a cargo boat, and it goes on a line from A to B.
Right.
But a tramp could, for example, sail out of Birkenhead with no cargo,
Yeah.
21 days down to the River Plate,
Yes.
1 day up the River Plate to a place called Rosario. It could there load something like 5,500 tons of maize,
Mm-hmm.
come back 300 miles down there in Buenos Aires, top off with another 1,000 tons, and then set off for 52 days to Japan.
Yeah.
On the way, taking fuel oil called bunkers
Yeah.
at Durban and Singapore. In Japan, the maize is delivered because the Japanese like it.
Yeah.
And then a message comes, a telegram in those days, go to Australia. So we set off 19 days down to Australia with no cargo. That is tramping. And in Australia, we're told, come to Sydney, load 6,000 tons of wheat for Avonmouth in the Bristol Channel. The next voyage, Persian Gulf.
So you could be anywhere.
You could be anywhere.
Absolutely anywhere in the world.
Oh, just nip to Canada and get
Yeah.
6,000 tons
Yeah.
of newsprint and bring it back to Manchester, go up the ship canal and drop it off. And we did that. And
Yeah.
they said, can you go back and get some more? That's tramping.
That's tramping. There we are.
And
Yeah.
I like it. It was interesting for 3 years.
Very, very interesting. And it's been going on for years, centuries.
It has.
Yes.
It has.
Masters
Yes.
have had authority
Yes.
in those days, centuries, yes, to negotiate ashore with an agent
Yes.
to find a cargo to go
Yes.
somewhere. Correct,
Yes.
David?
Yes, absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that is why some of them became very rich men in the old days. It was,
But you have the caution, obviously, and the slave trade. Of
Well,
course, yes.
and also some ship owners allowed the captain a certain cubic capacity of the hold for his own personal gain.
Right.
So he could
Mm.
then fix his own cargo for that particular
Yeah.
voyage.
Yeah.
But things have changed quite a bit now in the tramping trade, of course.
Yeah.
Tankers also tramped because
Yeah.
there was, well, I suppose there was a liner trade. I was on it once, and it was from Mina Al-Amadi in the Persian Gulf to the Isle of Grain.
Mm-hmm.
About a 6-week trip, round trip, and that's all we did. We just brought crude oil from there to the Isle of Grain back and forth.
Yeah.
But then there were the other smaller ships that distributed the refined products.
Yes.
They were very much like Ruffy's cargo, dry cargo tramping.
Yeah. Yeah.
They distributed petrol to, say, the Caribbean from a refinery here,
Yes.
then another refinery there, and taking it to Africa and so on, all over. So I travelled all over the world
Yes.
as well, but
Yes.
it was not quite so interesting as Ruffy's experience.
No.
And David is being very polite there, because when he says not quite so interesting, the tanker berth was usually
Miles.
miles out of any civilization, miles away from any civilization. The speed with which the cargo was loaded or discharged was fairly rapid,
Mm.
and you were probably turned round within 36 hours, and
Yeah.
away you went again.
Yeah.
You saw lots of sea during a tanker apprenticeship.
I'm sure you must
Bags
have.
of it, but not lots of ports, but very little time in them.
Yes.
But Ruffy, you see, might be in port for 3 weeks or something like that.
Ah.
Depending.
There's a story. We loaded in Hamburg and UK for 13 ports in the Persian Gulf. And we set off with everything from children's nappies to talcum powder to Scotch whisky to Morris LD vans. Oh, you name baked beans, you name it, we had it. And the first port of call was Muscat. And that's changed nowadays. My boy goes there on business. We discharged in Muscat, then we came round into the Gulf, Dubai.
Yeah.
That's changed. Now it's full of skyscrapers and offshore islands. In my day, there was a creek and some canoes into which we loaded cement. After 6 ports, I think it was, we were in Bushehr, which is in Persia, as it was then, on the eastern seaboard of the Gulf. And we discharged there and set off for Kuwait, which is in the northwest corner. And along the way, I was working the 4 to 8 watch. I was asleep, 4 o'clock in the morning, got on watch. Oh, why are we stopped? Ah, sandstorm. 6 o'clock, the old man said, get the anchor, mate. Mate went forward, started the old windlass up, heave away on the anchor, and immediately he ran full ahead. Well, full ahead on our ship was the magnificent speed of 9.3 knots, maximum. And I'm on the wheel. And about 6:35, the end of July 1960, after about 35 minutes, we'd reached our full speed, and there was a tremendous crump from the sharp end. The bow came out of the water. I was impaled on the wheel, and when the dust settled, and we, the old man and I, walked out onto the wing of the bridge, there, less than 1 meter below the surface, was the Madeira Reef. And so, here we are in the middle of a sandstorm, can't see a thing, no radar.
Oh dear.
Aground. And we spent a week there. David said we could be in port 3 weeks. That is true. Here we were not in port. We were in the middle of the Persian Gulf, 40 miles to Persia, 40 miles to Kuwait, and aground. Whereupon help was summoned. The Dutch tug Schelde came out. A salvage vessel came out. Lighters came out. We discharged the cargo into lighters. We laid out an anchor aft. The Dutch tug secured aft and was pulling over the stern. The salvage vessel secured alongside and was steaming full ahead. And after about 12 hours of grunting and groaning, we came off.
Oh my goodness. Yes.
That was wonderful.
Yes.
Up to the top of the Gulf, into the Shatt el Arab. Ah, right, we need a Lloyd surveyor, get a Lloyd surveyor. He comes along, gets some divers go down, make a report to the Lloyd surveyor, who says, right, if you put cement boxes in all the double-bottom tanks where they are leaking round the rivets, you can go back to UK, but no cargo. So we spent 3 weeks there, playing football in the evenings against the Germans, and building cement boxes during the day. Eventually, everything was sound. We were passed to sail back to UK. Off we go, 19 days out of the Gulf, round Arabia, up the Red Sea, through the Suez Canal, through the Med, turn right, into Falmouth, Haynes Steamship Company. There I've mentioned this Mickey Mouse organisation. Haynes Steamship Company had a base in Cornwall. They were a Cornish company originally before they were taken over by P&O in 1911. Into a dry dock, pumped out the dry dock. I got some lovely photographs of it at home. And Lloyd's man said, we can write that one off. So they scrapped her.
Oh no!
I think the old man was fired. I did a couple more trips and came ashore. And that is the story of the grounding and stranding of the motor vessel Trewalis on the Madeira Reef in the Persian Gulf in July 1960.
Amazing story! Oh my goodness, that's absolutely fantastic. Oh, I love it. Well, we're going to come back to Rafi in a minute. He's going to tell you a little bit more about his life and how he started and everything else. He's told us quite a bit already, but we'll get a little bit more out of him.
Okay.
David, tell us about yourself from the beginning. I mean, you already mentioned, obviously, you know, you've been on the BPs, on the tankers,
yes,
and how you started there. But start from the beginning and what sort of...
Well, as a first trip apprentice, you were the general dog's body. You polished brass, you scrubbed floors, you did everything else. The second year, you're allowed to become a little bit more technical. You'll probably spend a watch in the evening with the watchkeeping officer.
Yeah.
And that progressed until the fourth year, when not all your time, they still got plenty of work out of the apprentices. That was one of the reasons I think they had them, because they're so cheap.
Yeah.
I think I know my salary was £6, 6 shillings a month. Mind you, they fed me.
Yeah.
They watered me. They provided me with a very comfortable accommodation.
Yes.
And so I suppose, and of course, I left at the end of it with the second mate certificate.
Right.
So it was a bargain between the company and the apprentice.
Yeah.
And I would recommend apprenticeships to anybody. And I believe at the moment, most companies are trying to promote
they're starting
these.
again. Yes, they are, definitely. I'm really, really pleased. There's so many young people, finding it difficult to get into work. So it's a really good thing.
And personally, I believe anybody that started at the bottom in an industry and has actually had hands-on experience is the better employee at the end of the day.
Oh, yes.
Definitely. I may be wrong, but...
well, I actually agree with you. I totally agree with you.
But it was pleasant sometimes, but sometimes huge tracts of boredom. It was about...
Yeah.
Oh, I forget, was it 5 or 6 weeks it took us to get from Panama down to Newcastle, New South Wales. But then when we got to Newcastle, New South Wales, it was a tramping arrangement. Newcastle, New South Wales had coal, and one of the derivatives of coal is naphtha, which is a liquid, and they wanted that taken down to Melbourne, so we picked it up and took it down there.
Yes.
Pretty lethal stuff too, as a matter of fact, and very, very volatile. It's not the most volatile oil we carry, but quite dangerous from the point of view of producing gas, particularly in warm climates. But at the end of that, the boredom of the long sea voyages, it didn't appeal to me at all. And I thought, well, the only thing I've really seen that I enjoy about shipping is when you approach the port, this chap comes out in a boat, he climbs up the ladder, and all the panic that was on the bridge before picking up the pilot seems to dissipate. And this godlike creature just takes over and everything is calm and the ship comes alongside. I thought, well, I wouldn't mind having some of that.
Yeah.
So I left deep sea and went on the coast with F.T. Everard and Sons. And of course, we're in and out of ports. And within 2 years of being there, I was asked by the owners if I'd be a master. I was only 24 at the time, but
that's really good.
It was very enjoyable for me. We ran down to the West Country. Now, can you imagine running down to Cornwall to pick up china clay, getting there on a Friday night, the weekend, and they say, well, we're not working this weekend, we'll start loading cargo on Monday. Well, you've had a weekend in Cornwall for nothing. Wonderful. And it was up these delightful little creeks, and they'd say, well, you're loading cargo for Rouen, and then you go across the Seine and right up the Seine to Rouen. Delightful trip. People pay God knows what for that now.
They definitely do.
And I stayed there, as I say, for 11 years in all, 9 as master. And the largest ship I had a crew of 21. In those days, of course, ships had more crew. Now you get the large container boats in Felixstowe that have got crews less than that, about 18, some of them have.
Yes,
and they're carrying huge amounts of cargo.
Yes.
But it was very enjoyable on the coast. I met 1 or 2 delightful characters.
I'm sure.
Had 1 or 2 little accidents, but nothing where anyone was hurt badly at all.
No.
Just one major collision with an Icelandic trawler off the Isle of Man, where it ran slap bang into the middle of the ship at full speed. That was quite interesting. It penetrated one of the oil tanks, and fortunately we weren't carrying an inflammable oil. The oil ran out, and the sea ran in, and she just took a little disc like that. We were able to creep into the Isle of Man. We were just able to get into Ramsey with a bit of a shoehorn manoeuvre, where they did temporary repairs, and we had to go across the Mersey to be fully repaired afterwards. But all in all, it was a wonderful experience. And when I applied to be a pilot in Ipswich, I went before the sub-commissioners, and I'd held command for 9 years. I'd been running to Ipswich regularly as well, so I stood a pretty good chance, and I was fortunate enough because I think there were 8 other applicants at the time. But I stayed there from 68 until 86, when we amalgamated with the London River Pilots.
Yeah, yeah.
And then I was working Felixstowe and Ipswich. All in all, very interesting. Of course, during that time, I joined the Master Mariners and met all sorts of people that I'd met at sea before, which always an interesting experience.
So you had a common interest, you know, which is, which is brilliant. Thank you. All right, Ruffy, tell us a little bit more about yourself. I think you've got a few interesting little stories you're going to tell us. Not quite related to shipping, mind, but it's
What, motor trade stories?
Motor trade stories, yes. I'm sure our viewers will be fascinated.
Oh, I see. Well, yes, having taken grandfather's advice and come ashore, I was lucky enough to secure a sort of deluxe apprenticeship with a firm called Managerton in Ipswich. And they called it a pupilship. Again, it was cheap labour. They were supposed to be training you to be one of their managers. And that was interesting, and yes, I've serviced Rolls-Royce and Bentley motor cars. First job was to refurbish one for the sales department, top to bottom. And eventually, having progressed through the ranks, so to speak, I was sent off to Norwich at the company's head office to look after their Rolls-Royce and Bentley interests. And we did a good job. I luckily built a good team. That's not credit to me, that's credit to the people in the team. We had 20 people there, and in 1977 we won the Rolls-Royce Most Improved Distributor Award, and it was about that time where, holding the Royal Warrant, we had a phone call from Buck House. Can you supply a vehicle? Because he wants to move his carriage driving from, I think, somewhere in Hertfordshire when he started, up to Sandringham. So we searched about and found British Leyland, as it was in those days, could supply what was in fact a sort of post office van, a J4 van. But it was a development vehicle and it was 4-wheel drive.
Yes.
4-wheel drive. Just the job for the mud and Sandringham. And, so we delivered it to him and showed him how it worked and said, now look, to engage 4-wheel drive, you have to put your hand behind you like this and pull this button out, and that will engage drive on all 4 wheels. Fine. Within 2 days, I had a phone call. It doesn't work. What do you mean it doesn't work? The 4-wheel drive. I'll come over. So I drive from Norwich to Sandringham, and out he comes. Nice, friendly greeting, nice words, Royal Navy words, along the lines of, doesn't work, and so we tried to test the vehicle. Pulled this up, selected again, off it went. I said, that's your 4-wheel drive. Nobody showed me that, he says, and he proceeded to give me a rocket. And if you haven't had a rocket from the Duke of Edinburgh, you haven't had a rocket at all. But that was good fun. That was good fun. Not such good fun was having a new Rolls-Royce on the 1st of August 1974, going up into Lincolnshire, seeing 4 Rolls-Royce owners, coming home, setting off at 6 o'clock for the office next morning, and at 6:20, just by Disc Golf Club, one of the local haulage company's trucks took the side out of it.
Oh no!
It had done about 500 miles, and...
Oh dear.
Yes, well there you go, that's what happens. So, that was the motor trade. Changed a lot now. Back to the marine side. I love it. There's nothing, quite simply nothing, like messing about in boats.
I totally
And
agree.
I've been messing about on the Deben since 1948. Yes, 1948.
Yeah.
My mother was so surprised that I passed the 11 plus from the Central Junior School up near the station.
Yes.
The only boy to do so without an interview. She was so surprised, she presented me with a 14-foot dinghy, which was on the beach here by the pier.
Yes.
I wanted it in the Deben. Would any mother in Felixstowe allow their son to come with me? No. So I went alone. Set off from school one day in October, set off after school, and I suppose 4:30, something like that. And by midnight, I'd made it into the River Deben, by which time my mother had phoned the local police. Have you seen a small boy in a dinghy? Anyhow, they were able to assure her that they hadn't had to rescue anybody, and that got the dinghy there. And then, since then, I now write the notes for Reed's Nautical Almanac for the Deben, the Orwell, the Stour, Harwich Harbour. And I have run a sail training school, an RYA recognised training establishment, and I've helped people to learn how to get about safely on our seas.
Yes,
and I thoroughly
so
enjoyed it.
important.
Thoroughly enjoyed it. Now, my ship is up for sale, and I'm going to hang up my oilies.
That is it, it's no more. You're definitely not going to go back on the water.
It is our joint decision. My wife has a bad back, cannot sleep well on boat.
Right.
She's done 48 years, I've done 67 years, and the boat will be sold. And as somebody said, don't you worry, Ruffy, you'll get plenty of invitations on other people's boats.
There.
And I thought, that's nice, get a trip to sea without any money.
Oh, I love it. Oh, that's absolutely brilliant. Do you know, you've been absolutely fascinating guys to talk to. You really have. I've thoroughly enjoyed talking to both of you. With the Felixstowe Mariners' work, obviously, fantastic charity. And with two fantastic guys like you and the team, you can see totally why it's working. But they need new members. Anybody out there would like to join, get in touch. There is a website.
Felixstowe Master Mariners website is all the W's, mastermariners.co.uk.
There we are. And we'll put that out on the non-channel anyway. So if you haven't written it down, it'll be on there to see. Thank you. Thank you very much, guys. Thank you very much for coming to give me your fascinating stories.
Well, thank you very much. That was it.
Thank you for having us.
Thank
Yes.
you.
Pleasure.
Thanks a lot.